Call the meeting to order. And Michelle, can you take roll call?
Recording has started.
Mayor Horn?
Here.
Alderman Kittle?
Here.
Alderman Wendell?
Here.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Here.
Alderman Montello?
Here.
Alderman Volkert?
Here.
Alderman Kraft?
Here.
And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so I want to apologize to everybody that we're starting so late. We had a public hearing that was, I felt, important enough to give the individual that it was dealing with the opportunity to make their case, and I didn't want to rush that public hearing. So again, I apologize that we are starting so late, but that was why we started late.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we adopt the agenda.
You bet. All right, so there's a motion to adopt the agenda. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried. How about public comments? Is there any public comments? The only thing I'll throw out there was Chief had asked, so have you guys read the email from the St. Croix County Health Department about 150 active COVID cases in St. Croix County? We are a hotspot now. It is rapidly increasing. I think we were just talking about news stories. You don't know what to believe. One of the stories I looked at just briefly, Wisconsin is the second highest rate of increase of the states out there. And again, depending on what data they use. But it's just, I think the whole thing is, and I was talking to someone else today, mentioned about the Navajo Nation down in Arizona. Whereas Arizona is in very bad shape with COVID, the Navajo Nation has implemented masks. Like everyone has to wear masks, social distancing, and they have curfews. And I'm not going down the path of curfews. My whole only point in this: social distancing, wear masks, wash your hands. I think we are going to be fine. The president of the Navajo Nation, his comment was, and what he wanted his message to get out for Arizonans and other places is doing those three things. They see their numbers have started to decline on the Navajo Nation. Wear a mask, social distance, wash your hands. And I'll get off my soapbox. So I don't know, Chief or anybody else, anything to add? All right. Consent agenda.
We did that already.
We did the adoption of the agenda.
Sorry.
Now we're doing a consent
Yeah.
agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that, Alderman Kraft.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That's carried. New business, item 7.1, request for proposals, historic district nominations.
Good evening, Mayor Horn and City Council. At the June City Council meeting, the City Council authorized the publication of a request for proposals for the nomination of 2 historic districts. We received 4 responses to the RFP. The deadline was this past Thursday at 4:30. We did phone interviews on Friday. And then wrapped up reference checks, background checks here today. Our recommendation for the project is Legacy Architecture. They actually did the first phase of this project 2 years ago, did a very good job. They would actually plan to begin their work right away in August of this year, and hopefully we would have 2 new historic districts created. Their project expense would be fully covered by the grant, so there's no cost incurred by the city of New Richmond. We had a good experience working with them about a year and a half ago. They're also very good in terms of the administrative work that we send on for reimbursement. And so our recommendation this evening would be Legacy Architecture.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve the proposal as presented by Noah for the Historic District nomination project based on the information that he just provided.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Alderman Kittle. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Lindell,
You want to pull the mic down? Maybe he's not hearing.
Alderman Lindell,
Alderman Lindell?
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 7.2 is 707 East 6th Street.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. At the Keep It Beautiful committee meeting this past week, we had a couple of items for council consideration. One of them is 707 East 6th Street. As you know, the Keep It Beautiful program is a link on our website where people can go and they can have issues or concerns with properties within the city of New Richmond. And since 2019, we have had some issues with 707 East 6th Street with complaints about garbage, debris, vehicles. And as you see in your memo this evening, there's a quick synopsis from the police department of what they've tried to do to get things cleaned up there. So there is a good history. The police department had basically some really good movement from them in January of this year. And then things have moved backwards quite a bit. There's been a dumpster in the front driveway and 3 garbage bins, kind of garbage all over, a broken window. And we've had a number of complaints from the neighbors. And so we brought this to the Keep It Beautiful committee, and they had a really good discussion. The person who was complaining was on the phone with us. She gave us her complaints, her concerns, and her issues dating back over a year to a year and a half with this property. And so basically the Keep It Beautiful committee would like to move this forward to the city council for discussion on next steps. What they would like to see happen is they would like the property to be cleaned up by the city and the amount of the cost to be put on the tax roll. The questions that Alderman Montello had regarding this were, if we put this money on the tax roll, will we actually get paid back? How does that work if it goes into foreclosure? How does it work if they haven't paid their back taxes? And so we received some information from the county. I put that into the report that's attached for everybody. And then I would like to ask Nick Vivian to just give a quick synopsis on what happens if we do put those funds on the tax roll.
So a couple of different scenarios. First of all, you have to think in terms of how is it that the city gets paid back. First of all, certainly there could be a voluntary payment that gets made by the property owner at some point, provided the property owner wants to get that lien off of their property. Secondarily, if the parcel were to go into foreclosure, ultimately a foreclosure of a mortgage would not extinguish that particular assessment lien, and so a future owner presumably would pay that lien or would require that it be satisfied at closing before either buying it at a sheriff's sale or buying it from the bank. And we saw this with the Roth property that we dealt with over on First Street a couple of years ago. There were some trees that were at issue. The city didn't necessarily want to go in and pay the expense. The bank foreclosed on that property. Ultimately, the bank wound up taking the trees down and cleaning up the property so that the city didn't have to, and that's how we resolved that one. And then the third scenario is tax forfeiture. So if the property owner does not ultimately pay their property tax, there's a process that the county goes through that ultimately can result in a tax forfeiture. In which case, then after the property sells, the county is looking at then kind of winding up that property, paying off the cost of the foreclosure, paying off county costs and expenses and whatnot, and then the taxing authorities are kind of left to last place, and the city in that circumstance may or may not get paid. And so it's really just a matter of whether the property owner is making the payment, whether a new owner, buyer in foreclosure is making the payment, whether that be a bank or whether that be a new property owner, or if it comes to tax forfeiture, ultimately the city may or may not get paid in whole or in part, but the city really is in kind of last place. So there is some risk to the city taking on these efforts, depending on what happens with this property or other properties in similar positions. And the city should be aware that it may or may not get paid back or reimbursed if, in fact, it takes on efforts like this.
Well, I think the important thing is, and I asked the question, and Beth, thank you for getting the information, and Nick. It's important that we understand that we're not guaranteed we're going to get paid. Obviously, in the real estate market that we're in, it's all based on whether there's equity in a property when it's sold. So I used to have an understanding. I mean, it was just my own understanding. Boy, I put on the tax rolls, you were guaranteed you're going to get your money, and that's actually not true. It just depends on equity and how those things play out. That doesn't diminish the need for these properties to get some attention. It's just a balancing act. And actually, Beth, if I could, I want to ask the chief. I drove by that property yesterday, and there's actually been some activity there. Chief, do you have an updated report for us?
Unfortunately, I do not. I did not make it over there today. I know that the subject that resides there is back there now, hoping to continue moving on it. He was away for a period of time. So, I don't know. I guess I didn't make it over there today, and the officer that's been assigned to that was on his day off today. I know he's been watching it very closely. There has been citations issued there in the recent past. I don't think that they've come to fruition yet in court, so I don't have an update there either. I think the next court appearance is potentially Wednesday.
Yeah, and let me just add on that point, there are different strategies that the city can utilize to address properties of this type. Sometimes we issue citations, but the challenge with citations is that ultimately sometimes property owners just pay the citations and they don't abate the situation or the condition of the property. Sometimes the city might look to go out and clean it up, but at the same time, as Councilmember Montello noted, there's no guarantee that the city is going to be reimbursed. And there's a policy question as to whether the city wants to be involved in cleaning up private properties or whether we want to take a different approach. And then third, there's the option of pursuing civil remedies, which in the most extreme circumstances we have and will do. But as a matter of course, the goal is not to be punitive. The goal is to encourage and solicit the property owners' cooperation in trying to get these properties cleaned up.
And Nick, this is Alderman Montello again. What's a possibility of us doing a cursory title exam to try to establish, and I understand that's kind of loose, what an equity position might be?
Yeah, and that's certainly an opportunity and an area that we would, if we were going to pursue that type of option where we do the cleanup and assess the property back, We probably would want to do a title search to see what the outstanding mortgages look like, to see what the outstanding liens look like. It's not going to be perfect, but it'd be a tool in helping us understand exactly what the equity position is in the property. So if the council were to desire to take that step forward, that would certainly be a recommendation that I'd make as we do some diligence to determine whether there may be equity in the property, and just what our position might be if in fact the property tax forfeits at the end of the day.
And Chief, you said at our meeting last week, you talked about the fact that there are a number of properties in the city of Richmond right now that people could file the uncut grass complaint against. And Chief, I want to ask you, is it fair to say that if we don't take action on this particular property, I mean, this is about as egregious as it gets right now within the city limits? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. This one has been, normally we're able to get compliance through voluntary measures. Rarely do we have to issue citations. Normally we can work with property owners, but in this one has been pretty egregious and has gone on for an unfortunate amount of time, I guess. So.
And I think it's important that the rest of the council understand the information we were given, and Beth, you can speak to this. I think you were the one that passed this on at our meeting last week. The owner of the roll-off dumpster, it's not a little one, said that if they don't get paid, it's full, and if they don't get paid, they're going to go in there and basically dump the stuff on the driveway and pull their roll-off out of there. Did I remember that right?
It wasn't city staff who mentioned that, Alderman Montello. It was actually the complainant who had talked to the people who had the roll-off. So they had pulled up and they had talked to them and said if they don't pay for the roll-off, they're going to dump it out. But it wasn't any staff who spoke with them personally.
And complete disclosure, I own a piece of property that is adjacent to this property, so I'm going to have to abstain on any action. But just if I look at it, not as a neighboring property, and I wasn't the one that filed the complaint, if the city's ever going to do something about a property, this one probably exceeds what the standard is. Beth, do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. At this time, we have this property, and as you've heard a number of council meetings ago, 225 West 5th Street is in the same similar instance where we've tried for years to get compliance, and it has not been voluntary. So 2 properties currently within the city.
And I agree with Beth on that, Alderman Montello, that we've exhausted a lot of resources and man hours to try to gain that voluntary compliance. And I think the complainants in both these situations that Beth just brought up are wit's end comes to mind. I think they're frustrated. There has been action. But again, there's only so much that can be done through citation. As you saw, years ago with the Borst property as well. Those processes take a lot of hours and man time and things like that. So it hasn't been, I guess, for lack of effort on the police department or the city's side on this.
Yeah.
So let me just add, I mean, it's not, a lot of this stuff is not for the fact, as the chief just said, for not trying. You kind of get to the end of the process, and the last resort for the city typically is to cite these properties as a nuisance and to bring a civil action asking a court to compel the property owner to clean them up under the city's ordinances. Short of that, we'd really appreciate voluntary compliance so that we don't have to get to that point. But as has been noted, the complainants in these circumstances, while these can be treated as private matters between neighbors, typically look for the city to provide some assistance in working with the property owners. The problem is a lot of these property owners lack the means, lack the resources, maybe older. And so there's some practical challenges as well that even if you issue citations, don't necessarily abate or address the nuisance situation. And so each situation is a little bit different, but we try to be as thoughtful as we can in moving people along toward compliance as opposed to anything else.
So is 707, is that a rental property?
It is not. It is owned by a person.
And what is the next step per our ordinance?
So the next step normally is citations, and we've done citations. And so
Yep.
those, as Craig said, have not come to the court date yet. However, the folks that are complaining are continuing complaining, and they're feeling that it's kind of going on deaf ears at the city. So we brought it to Keep It Beautiful, and now we're bringing it to the council with this next recommendation of do we go in there and hire someone to clean it up, take the dumpster, mow the grass, and then kind of put the bill to them. If they don't pay the bill, it goes against the tax roll. So that's
So that would be our next steps per our ordinance, is to step in and do the cleanup and put it on the tax roll.
That's not specifically in our ordinance. The next step is to bring it to city council. That was the recommendation from Keep It Beautiful, based on Nick's opinion and the opinion of the chief. Those are where, that's why it's here now.
Yeah, and Mayor Fred, it's certainly an option for the city to go in and do that after notice to the resident. It would also be an option for the city to proceed under the city's nuisance ordinance, which would then allow for a summons and complaint to seek a court order, which is an extreme step, but may need to be taken. I'd also note that Rayanne has provided information indicating that there are also significant utilities outstanding on this property, which currently stand at about $2,000, which are anticipated to be applied or assessed against this property in November. And so I'm not certain whether the staff has solicited proposals as to what the cost might be to do the cleanup, but you're already looking at about a $2,000 assessment that's also going to hit this property later this year.
So it gets down to the question of, do we take that risk more for the neighbor's sake than anything? And I presume there's a letter that would be, so if the city was going to do the cleanup, I presume that there's a letter sent, certified mail presumably, that you have 30 days, whatever the time frame is, to clean up, to do whatever the steps are. And otherwise the city would step in. And maybe 30 days is too much. I don't know what the statutes are for that, but is that the steps we would be taking?
Yes. And at this point, Mayor, Nick would be sending the letter out certified, and his statement would be, next steps would be the city would be stepping in, if that's the motion.
Yeah, and we would also have the police department serve that notice, so we'd send it certified. It actually receives the recipient with a personal hand delivery.
All right. And time frame? I just wanted it all be very clear to the council if they're going to make a motion or they're going to, what they're considering, kind of what that next step is.
Yeah, that letter can be prepared and delivered as soon as authorized by the council.
And then, Mayor, I think you're asking how long would we give them? I think we would then once again give them another 30 days to get it cleaned up, or then we would step in. And I know that seems like a lengthy process, but I think we need to give them that one more opportunity.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be willing to make the motion that we have city council or city legal representation prepared to be hand delivered or certified mail delivered to you under 30 days to clean up the property.
So if I understood the motion
Did anybody
correctly,
hear that?
is, yeah, so I'll try and repeat what I heard or what I'm understanding, and I'll give Kirk the opportunity to correct me if I'm wrong. It's basically his motion is for the city to proceed. That gives, go through the process of the notification. They have 30 days, and if it's not cleaned up, lawn mowed, that type of stuff, the city would step in and clean it up, mow the lawn, and put the bill on the tax roll if it's not paid.
That's correct.
Very good. So we have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
We have a second. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, go ahead, call the roll.
Alderman Lindell.
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Abstain.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
All right, 7-3, tall grass, weed complaints, and mowing.
Mayor and Council, I'm going to try to close out of this. There, that's be better. The Keep It Beautiful Committee also took up the issue of our weed ordinance, and as you know, we've kind of been handling the weed notices on a advisory basis, again, trying to get that voluntary compliance. There are a handful of lots that, even though we've sent reminder notices, have not been mowed, and the committee recommended resuming a process of enforcing the weed ordinance by having those properties mowed and placing those assessments on the or billing the properties, and if they're not paid, placing those assessments on the tax roll. So that's the recommendation from the committee to move forward with.
All right, anybody have any questions? All right, hearing no questions, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion that, assuming properties have met the city's standard for notice, et cetera, that these properties will be mowed by the city, and in fact, that making it within that we would contract that service out. I think that was predominantly the question.
Yeah, and we had discussed that. Again, I think that we can evaluate that based on the number of properties that we have and availability and those types of things. But that was one option that the committee had discussed was if city staff aren't available to do it, one of the options for getting them mowed would be to contract that service out.
Yeah, so I guess if city staff has the time, or if they have the ability to mow, but that in fact it would be okay to contract that service out. And the recommendation that we have, I guess, doesn't necessarily spell that out, but I was part of the discussion last week, so that's my motion.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman
Yes.
Lindell.
All right, and that motion passes. So item 7.4 is 45th Parallel Industrial User Agreement.
Mayor and Council, we've been working with 45th Parallel over the last couple of years, kind of to evaluate their discharge to the city's wastewater system. And what we've found is that they have some high strength waste that gets discharged, which has a significant impact on the wastewater treatment plant, our treatment efficiencies, and those types of things. So it's typical for industrial users like this that discharge high strength waste to have an industrial user agreement in place. In fact, our ordinance requires it. And so we've been working with 45th Parallel on kind of nailing down the different options that they have for discharge. And where we've landed is that they're going to send kind of the industrial portion of their wastewater to a digester facility and remove that from the regular flow that gets discharged to the sanitary sewer. So we put together with Nick's assistance the industrial user agreement to kind of spell that out, kind of talk about that procedure and what the cost would be if they did discharge to the city's system at higher than domestic strength waste. So if there's questions on that agreement, I can certainly answer them, but I won't read through the whole thing unless you want.
No, I'm going to offer a motion that we approve the user agreement as drafted.
All right, there is a motion to approve the 45th Parallel Industrial User Agreement. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, call the roll.
Alderman Montello?
Yes.
Alderman Volkert?
Yes.
Alderman Kraft?
Yes.
Alderman Kittle?
Yes.
Alderman Lindell?
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier?
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 7.5 is Resolution 072001, Compliance Maintenance Resolution.
So, Mayor and Council, annually the wastewater treatment plant is required to, typically this would go to the Utility Commission, but required to have the city approve the compliance maintenance annual report that basically gives a letter grade and kind of a grade point average to the treatment plant based on a number of factors from influent loading and flow to effluent loading and flow, a number of different things that are tracked and evaluated at the facility just to ensure that we don't all of a sudden one day need a brand new wastewater plant and nobody ever knew about it. So that compliance maintenance annual report is attached to the packet. Again, I won't read through the whole thing if you don't want, but our end grade point average for 2019 was 3.57, and both of the areas where we were, I'll say less than an A, were due largely to the high strength kind of industrial loading that we've been getting. So hopefully those things will be addressed based on the agreement that was just approved by the council.
So it's fair to say, Jeremiah, that when it comes to effluents, the Richmond wastewater treatment plant is at the top of its class.
I'd say that's accurate, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I've read the report, and I'm going to offer a motion that we approve this resolution 072001.
All right, there motion to approve Resolution 072001, the Compliance Maintenance Resolution. Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second
I'll
that.
second that motion.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. wondering, first of all, why the Utility Commission didn't review the report.
And I'm looking at Jeremiah or Mike.
So the timing of the report, it basically it's needs to be submitted back to the DNR during the first part of July, and so since the Utility Commission hasn't met, that's why we brought it to this group.
Okay.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Lindell,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. So item 7.6, Johnson warranty deed.
Mayor and Council, you recall at the last meeting we discussed the idea of acquiring a small piece of property south of LG Peterson Park from the Johnsons who live at 497 Marshall Road. And so we discussed that as directed by the council, and they agreed to the purchase price that was proposed of $4,300. So we had Nick draft the warranty deed, and we're recommending approval of that deed to acquire that property.
Does anybody have any questions? All right, I would entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I would move the warranty deed be approved.
All right, we have a motion to approve the warranty deed. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Lindell,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 7.7, Second Amendment to Contract for Use of West Central Biosolids Facility.
Mayor and Council, this is another item that typically would go to the Utility Commission, but since they haven't met and the biosolids facility is trying to move forward with an upgrade project, we wanted to bring this to the council for consideration. So, as you may know, we're one of the founding members of the regional West Central Wisconsin Biosolids facility. And that facility is planning an upgrade similar to what the city's doing at our wastewater treatment plant right now. And in order to make that upgrade, they're going to use similar financing as us, which is a 20-year Clean Water Fund loan. And so they've asked their members to make the commitment to renew through that 20-year loan life so that those upgrades can be made. So the amendment to that contract is attached, which basically is just a change to the timing of the contract.
Does anybody have any questions? So I presume the product of the biosolids facility is similar to Milorganite?
It is. It's not a saleable product like Milorganite, but it is used as a soil amendment
natural
to
fertilizer.
farm fields. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So what are they? So if it's not a saleable product, what are they They have contracts for it to be disposed of?
They have contracts to land spread it with farmers around the Ellsworth area for the most part.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, I would entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I would put forward a motion to recommend the approval of the Second Amendment to the members' long-term contract with West Central Biosolids through December 31st of 2040.
All right, we have a motion to approve these. Do we have a second? Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Lindell,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 7.8, authorization to bid Nature Center to Doar Prairie Trail.
Mayor and Council, as you might recall, we received a Knowles Nelson Stewardship Grant to construct a trail connection from the Nature Center to the Doar Prairie, and that project was included in the 2020 Capital Improvement Plan. So we've been working with SEH as selected by the council earlier this year to get that design completed, and we're requesting authorization to bid that project. We would bring those bids back to the council in August for award. I would note we'll also have a couple of easements associated with that project, similar to the Jefferson Marshall project here, that we would bring back next month as well. There is a figure kind of showing the concept layout in the packet as well.
All right, does anybody have any questions?
Jeremiah, I'm just looking at the map here. So to cross the river, is that on the bridge deck?
Yes.
Is where that happens?
Yep. Yep.
You do that up at the highway elevation, and then you get off and go. It's like an exit ramp.
Yep.
And you go down and you actually go under the bridge.
Correct.
To get on the trail. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So there would be an underpass on either side of the river, so that from the Nature Center, you could go underneath the east side of the bridge, come up to the existing trail on the north side of West 4th Street, cross the bridge on the existing trail, back down under the west side of the bridge, and then up to the Prairie.
And I did receive a call about this, that the city was going to drill a tunnel under the river. So I had to correct them that no, we are not. It's using the existing bridge. It's funny how rumors get propagated. Anyway, any other questions? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion at this time. Nobody wants to pass this?
I will make the motion to advertise for bids for the construction portion of the trail.
All right. There's a motion to authorize the bids for the Nature Center to Doar Prairie Trail. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Lindell,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 7.9, Raedeke easement 533 and 547 Marshall Road.
Mayor and Council, back to the Jefferson Marshall project. As we discussed when we kind of put the concept together for this project, one of the items included was making a trail connection from the existing trail in Manette Park out to Marshall Road and then up through LG Peterson Park to West 4th Street, as well as through Victoria Park to the existing crossing locations on West 4th Street. So part of that is acquiring the easement from the Raedekes for not only the trail, but also water main and storm sewer that will run through kind of the north half of the lot 4 there. And as part of that easement agreement, then we would, the city would reconstruct the parking lot in between the two buildings to accommodate all of the parking that we're taking out for the trail, the water main, and the storm sewer.
So Jeremiah, that's going right between the two buildings, then?
The parking lot will go between the buildings. The trail will go to the north of the 533 building.
In the existing parking lot.
Yeah, where the existing parking lot is right now. Yep.
Does anybody have any questions?
Jeremiah, you mentioned reconstruction to allow for the parking. What is that? What is the cost? Is that something that's already been budgeted for, or am I missing something?
Yes, so that was included in the overall street reconstruction project. So
Okay.
it'll be completed by the contractor as part of that contract.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I would entertain a motion at this time.
Mayor, I'll make a recommendation to approve the Raedeke easement.
All right, we have a motion to approve the Raedeke easement. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Call the roll.
Alderman Kittle.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
Alderman Lindell.
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
Alderman Montello.
Yes.
Alderman Volkert.
Yes.
Alderman Kraft.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 710, the T-Mobile Water Tower Lease, Second Amendment to Agreement.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This would typically have gone to the Utility Commission as well, but as Jeremiah indicated, with the Utility Commission not meeting, this is something that we are bringing forward to the Council tonight. So since 1999, the city has had a water tower lease agreement with T-Mobile. It has been amended one time. This would be a second amendment to it, which addresses the term as well as the monthly rent that would be collected to have their equipment remain on the tower. This agreement was reviewed by Nick. We find it from a staff and a legal perspective acceptable. The highlights of the second amendment provide for an escalation factor of 3% at each renewal period, and the option to renew for 4 additional 5-year terms. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, tonight we would just be recommending approval of the second amendment to the site agreement with T-Mobile.
All right, does anybody have any questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve the Second Amendment to the site agreement with T-Mobile.
All right, we have a motion to approve the T-Mobile water tower lease. Is there a second to that
Second.
motion? We have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, call the roll.
Alderman Lindell,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier,
Yes.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. Item 711 is the 2021 property revaluation.
Mayor and Council, earlier this year, in light of COVID, we had originally scheduled to have a revaluation of properties in the 2020 year. However, due to where we're currently at, there was a couple of options that we have discussed with the assessor, which is accurate appraisal. Typically in a revaluation year, they would start field work in the fall, but given where we currently are tracking with the pandemic, we are recommending to keep a similar timeline as we did in the 2020 with starting that work in the spring. And the timeline's outlined in the packet, but this allows us additional time to see where obviously the COVID pandemic continues to track. And if we need to take additional precautionary measures as part of that, we will also be planning and working very closely with Accurate to monitor that situation. But essentially it would start to begin notification in March. We wouldn't anticipate actual field work to be conducted until later in the spring or early summer, with then board of review occurring sometime in September. So at this point, we would just recommend that we, obviously continue to monitor the COVID situation very closely, but start to begin the planning phase of a spring 2021 timeline for the revaluation.
Anybody have any questions? Got a question? All right, so does this require a motion? Is it more by consensus?
I think we'd just be looking for more consensus, Mayor.
Yeah. Does anybody have any objections? All right, so be it by consensus.
Seems to make sense.
All right, then item 712 is the waiving of utility late fees.
Mayor and Council, as part of the Safer at Home order, the Public Service Commission met on March 24th and ordered several changes to utility tariffs throughout Wisconsin, which included a moratorium on disconnections, a moratorium on certain collection aspects or agreements that we would typically comply with underneath our individual tariff agreements. And part of that also was the deferral of any type of late fees or penalties associated with that. As we moved out of the Safer at Home order in May, the guidelines from the PSC did not change and that order still remained in place. However, late in June and in early July, the PSC has issued kind of a new order that outlines several aspects. It's attached in the memo. I won't go through every one, but essentially beginning July 15th, they are now allowing utilities to begin to assess and begin the disconnection process, as well as beginning to assess late fees that would ensue on the dollar amount that would have been incurred moving forward. So during the time of the Safer in order to the date of the lifting, which is July 15th, we could not assess any fees for balances incurred during that period. This logistically causes some issues within our accounting software. Many utilities are experiencing the same thing. It's been something that we've discussed with the Public Service Commission. many softwares are set up to assess those penalties based upon the past due balance and not based upon a date range parameter. So what that would require is our staff to manually adjust every account that would have a late fee that would need to be assessed to it. Instead, what we're recommending, and what many utilities in Wisconsin are doing, is deferring or waiving those late fees, which the PSC has allowed utilities to do that through the end of this year. But really what that allows us to do is to bring all accounts into a current status as part of our tax roll process that would begin in September and finalizes in November. So after November, when tax roll is finalized, that would give us a clean slate, to, for lack of better words, to then begin assessing fees so that we are in compliance with the Public Service Commission's order. So at this point, we would recommend that those fees be waived until the tax roll process is completed, essentially bringing everyone's account to a current balance. And what that would be on all utilities. So this would cover the electric, water, and sewer and stormwater utility as well.
Does anybody have any questions? All right, I would entertain
I would make a
motion.
motion.
All right, so we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion? All right, call the roll.
Alderman Montello,
Yes.
Alderman Volkert,
Yes.
Alderman Kraft,
Yes.
Alderman Kittle,
Yes.
Alderman Lindell,
Yes.
Alderman Weinmeier.
Yes.
All right, and that motion passes. And item 713, 2021 healthcare process.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this one, two updates. One is to formally approve Mike Montello, Councilman Montello, and Councilperson Kraft to our compensation subcommittee. We began this about a year and a half ago. Having two council members assist us through this process has been very helpful. The second piece is, as we begin our health insurance process, we'd like to direct select brokers throughout the area to assist us in getting the most comprehensive plan and competitive plan for our employees in the city. So there's two recommendations. One is to approve the compensation committee, and the other is to allow for moving forward with direct select for brokers.
All right, does anybody have any questions? All right. Do you need it as a motion or just consensus?
I think we can just do consensus on that as well.
Does anybody have any objections? All right, we'll make it so. Item 8, communications miscellaneous. Anybody have anything?
Mayor, I'd like to remind everyone to request their absentee ballots
Request your absentee ballots.
for the August 11th election.
August 11th election.
Yeah,
So there's a primary.
the primary is August 11th, and we are this close to 1,000 ballots sent out.
All right. It's
There's
impressive.
a prize for the 1,000th. No, there's not.
All right. So if you highly recommend absentee ballot, get your requests in if they're not in already.
Please.
Staff would appreciate that. Any other communications?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Chief Yalick. Plan, she didn't announce it till Wednesday, and she was done last Friday. So we wish her well. She's been very good to work with from a law enforcement standpoint. She was, I don't know exactly how long she was with the pre-release, but it was considerable, and she was always very pro-city and our needs. So we appreciate her service and wish her well in retirement.
Very good. Anything else? All right, motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I make a
So
motion
moved.
to adjourn.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Carried, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Recording has stopped.